thank you, everybody. From the volume of everybody talking, sounds like the networking is going well. And in case I forget to mention it, we always have this room till 3 o'clock. So, we'll wrap up the panel, a couple minutes before 2, and if people want to kind of continue. So, apologize for the lack of seats, but we had 12 people who kind of walked in, which is awesome. Encouraged. Of course, I say it's encouraged, and that encourages people not to sign up and then come last minute. So, next time, we're going to have to cut it off and stop people at the door. So anyway, as I mentioned before, Tom Spadia, partner with Spadia and Liana. We're franchise attorneys and co-founded the PFA here actually with Andrew. I'll start with him in the middle as one of our co-founders and board members. Really helped get this thing off the ground and has been instrumental in keeping it going. Before that, I've known Andrew for a long time when he was still a student at Drexel. And I was at Rita's, and Andrew was actually our intern in our franchise development and real estate department. So that was a long time ago. And after that, he went on, stayed in franchising, and moved into the. He was selling franchises for Franchise Dynamics, a franchise outsourced sales company for a while. Had a lot of success with that. Moved into the insurance business. Actually founded, is kind of a lifelong entrepreneur. Founded an insurance company, built it up, got licensed in all the states, focused on selling to franchisees. And one of our sponsors, and that's obviously not a coincidence, Arthur J. Gallagher, acquired his practice and brought him on board, and now he's gone back out on his own again, the call of the entrepreneur, and is a franchisee with Philly Pretzel Factory and also FMT and now College Hunks Hauling. So he's a multi-brand franchisee and multi-unit franchisee. Next to me, Pierre Malcolmy. Pierre is the founder of Full Cycle. They're a newly launched indoor cycle studio franchise system. We help Pierre and his partners, they're kind of scattered around the country here, launch that brand nationwide. So that's just gotten started. They're using the area developer model to attract players like them, and I like he's kind of the player coach. Not only is the franchisor, but also is the area developer of this region, and they're looking to attract more area developers. Also a regional developer for European wax centers and a multi-unit franchisee of Massage Envy. So I don't think we could get a better example of sort of the theme today of the blurring lines between franchisees and franchisors and the shift. And Kim Graham at the end, friend for a long time. She's currently a franchise business consultant with FranNet, an organization that many of you know and have used in this room, matchmaking franchisees and franchisors. And prior to that, she has a lot of experience on the financing side, which I think we'll talk about because I think that's woven into this changing web of franchising as a senior finance consultant with Benetrends, who many of you know using the 401k rollover and the SBA funding. So thank you, Kim and Andrew and Pierre, for being on this panel. Appreciate you guys really dedicating your time and contributing. We had a kind of a call yesterday going over a lot of stuff. As mentioned, the topic is that multi-unit, multi-brand franchising, and it's that growing trend of supersized franchisees. I didn't get any cease and desist letters for using supersized. I was worried Josh would have had to answer that one. So as always, this is a open discussion. Welcome questions at any time. I think that these panels, for those of you who've been there before, that's how we like to kind of keep it moving. So I'll kind of kick it off with the first question, maybe right here to Pierre, is what do you feel is the advantages? We were talking yesterday about being a not even multi-unit, but a multi-brand franchisee that you're seeing more of from a franchisee's perspective.
Thanks, Tom.
And also feel free to elaborate anything you want to say on this that I missed in the intro.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for the invite. The brands that I represent, even the third brand, the Full Cycle that we're launching as a franchisor, the three brands that Tom mentioned, Massage Envy and European Wax Center, they attract the same clientele for the most part. About 70% of our clientele in Massage Envy are women, and about 95% of our clientele at European Wax Center are women. So they're complementary. When you have multi-brands that have the same clientele, it's a lot easier to locate them and market and use sometimes it allows staffing to be used between both concepts. Although they're owned separately, they have different franchisors and they have different franchisees for the most part. Most locations of both concepts are together, and for the most part, next to each other in shopping centers.
I guess there's not mic.
Is the mic not
No,
yet?
I think the mic just goes to that. So.
Okay. So basically, the clientele are the same, and that's why I gravitate to the female-oriented businesses, because I was talking with Kim, most of you, those who spend money are the women, and the men are the ones who want to try and save the money. So I look for businesses that have.
We can do a whole discussion on that one.
So if you want a business that has very low expectations of men coming in, it's those two, but you have the higher end female clientele that will come and spend money with you.
So on that, and Andrew, we were kind of talking about that shared clientele, not even from a direct, but an indirect, just business intelligence. Maybe you could speak towards that, the service brands versus the brick and mortar.
Yeah, so obviously Philly Pretzel Factory is brick and mortar. And to get people in the door, one of our main things is to get out in the community. And being out in the community is very important to myself and obviously my business partners, Dad. So when we're out and kids love pretzels, they're always at soccer games, they're across the board. So one thing that we've done is across our brands, I can buy one full-page Clipper magazine article and put all my brands on it. So it's saving cost effectiveness across the board. We can buy essentially a sponsorship for a full age group for softball, for Little League. And we can have each team represented by a different company. So when people look at it, they're not seeing one owner. So they're not seeing one big business. They see multiple little businesses. They don't have to need to know that the top guy owns all of them. Also,
Any pushback from the franchisor or from a marketing standpoint? You don't have to be specific, but even if there's a franchisor in the room. But that could be a question even for Kim as well, is as you see candidates who want a different brand, that franchisors maybe get uncomfortable. Can you comment on that?
well, I think what we talked about yesterday is if the brand is aggressive as the franchisee is, they see the big picture and they know that it's going to work all together. If a brand is a little bit stepping back, trying to do a slow marketing scheme, a slow approach to development, they'll be a little bit more, I guess, complacent in their marketing. So one of my main questions when I'm interviewing a franchisor, just as much as they're interviewing me, is will you let me own multiple brands? Because if you're not going to let me, well, I'll see you later. And that's my prerogative as a franchisee, as a business owner, is to tell them, hey, I don't fit you just as much as you might not fit me. So let's end this conversation now rather than go down that path.
Kim, that's a good segue in terms of candidates and doing the matchmaking. Have you seen sort of a change, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, so especially when it comes to healthcare, they're a little bit more hesitant.
Can you speak a little?
On healthcare, they've been a little bit more hesitant on allowing somebody to own multiple businesses, just because there's a lot of moving components that they want a franchisee to focus on first. I had a client that did a frozen yogurt business, but then also he was a marketing executive. He also did a digital marketing franchise. The yogurt business was one that was going to take about 12 months to even build out. And it was more so for his retirement plan. The digital marketing, since it was very complementary to his current skill set, he utilized to help get the brand up and running and to be able to start building more connections within the network. And neither franchisor in that case had an issue with it. It really depends on if there's cross-marketing abilities within the franchisor, then there's something that they tend to have a little bit more value to, such as in Driven Brands, for example. A lot of Meineke and Mako owners have multi-units, but a Mako owner might have a Meineke franchise as well, since they're under the same roof, they're in the same system, but they're also complementary to the client as well.
What are you seeing? So, Pierre, from the franchisor perspective, that's good, whoever just killed that fan. From the franchisor perspective, maybe you could give your take on that, of what you're worried about someone who has multiple brands.
Having two units or two brands, or representing two brands already, It depends on the franchisor. We have one of the brands that I represent is very protective of the brand and will not allow the franchisees to market with any other brand. And they want to know specifically what the branding is going to be. They want to approve all the marketing that you're going to do in the region. Being a franchisor, on the franchisor side, branding is very critical. Most people understand that when you have a brand, its value is very important to the concept for continuity. So, and keeping consistency throughout the brand is important to build long-term growth. And that's what.
Do you see, shifting focus to the multi-unit franchisee, the people who do, that they want to build. I mean, you're seeing now the 10, the 20. There was an Entrepreneur magazine talking about, Fran Data was quoted in it saying that, I think the article said why multi-unit franchise ownership is now the norm, not just the multi-brand, but saying that 53% of the 450,000 franchise units in the country are now under multi-unit branding or multi-unit ownership. So seeing that trend, do you think that's something that emerging franchisors, I mean, you guys are emerging, but you've been in it and that, so I know there's a lot of people thinking of starting a franchise or just getting started. Any thoughts on how they should handle maybe a franchisee group that's looking at buying who's larger than even they are from a financial standpoint? Kind of a shifting of the balance of power.
Oh yeah, it's no one franchisor has all the answers, and they always need help, whether they bring in a CEO or a CFO or whoever else on board. But developing fresh, a new concept, me and my partners don't have all the answers, so we would love to have a regional developer, a group of franchisees come on board with additional knowledge that can help us grow the brand, and it complements our weaknesses because we all have we have something that we don't know yet, and someone else knows it. We would love to have them on board and help us grow the brand.
How about your thoughts on that, Andrew? About the larger franchisees? I mean, do you think that franchise agreements themselves are getting a little bit more open to negotiation?
Yeah, so I think, number one, an emerging brand should almost look at it as a compliment. If a big franchisee is coming in and saying, hey, I want to be a part of the system at a young age, I have this experience, let me help you, and guess what, I'm paying royalties on top of it. You don't have to pay me. So I think it's a compliment to the emerging brand if you do get a larger franchisee that knows what they're doing and can help you. Fitness machine technicians, for example, I'm with the CEO at least once every week, if not twice, 3 times a week, just trying to build the brand for the next franchisee coming in the door. I want to see the brand grow as much as he does because, well, as we said, brand recognition is huge. So as long as the next franchisee is as strong as I am, which we're hoping, it's just going to grow the whole brand. And then on the franchise agreement, I mean, I was on the other side for a long time, and it was, well, this is a franchise agreement, either sign it, leave it. Well, what I'm seeing now and what I've been able to do with certain brands is negotiate on that franchise agreement, be it territory size, be it franchise fee, or be it services for franchise fees. So I will give them something, and obviously, I want to be a franchisee. That's how I'm going to make my money. So let's work on what it looks like. And I think you're seeing that more and more,
Yeah,
you do.
kind of and Kim, are you seeing that as well? And by the way, I might think of some questions here. Or I'll call people out soon. Would you like to comment on that, about the changing nature of the candidates?
Yeah, so within the last 3 years, especially with unemployment rates going back down, a lot more people have been wanting to have one foot in, one foot out the door when it comes to corporate. And finding a lot more semi-absentee business models more attractive to people, where they want to be able to scale something as well. So if they do, in 2-3 years after they get that corporate job, end up having to get laid off or leave again, they have something to be able to fall back on. But in order to replace that income that people are, especially in our tri-state area, generally making, they want to be able to grow something scalable enough with one concept that they can focus on. So see a lot of clients wanting something scalable and being able to own a territory, especially if in the Philadelphia area, for example, there's one territory that doesn't make sense from an SEO digital marketing standpoint that the franchisor is providing, then they'll want to be able to have one franchisee in that space to make them more profitable, but it's going to come at a very large franchise fee cost, which they're negotiable on now, and they say that up front, knowing that it's a large fee to ask for to be able to take over, say, 14 technically units in the area. It's just the marketing capacity if somebody's looking online for their services, and it wouldn't be really make sense for that area to be divided up if they're really coming from all over from where they see the tracking in the digital world.
Excellent.
If I may add, as a franchisor, we have a group of franchisees that want to buy multi-units in the Dallas area, and they already are negotiating with us, and we're going to give in on some of those rights of first refusals and some other, I would call, minor changes to the franchise agreement. Had we had 100 units sold, we would not be considering that adjustments.
Because of the advantage that
Because
it's
of the
going to give
advantage.
you and the skill set.
Altogether, exactly.
Kind of that expectations. Thoughts, questions?
If your multi-unit is also multi-brand,
Yes.
do you select them or do you consider possible cross-promotion opportunities? And if so, how does that work? And are there reasons from any of the brands that you are prevented from doing that?
The question was, I'll just repeat the question. The question was about cross-promotion between brands, and is there things that prevent that, or how do you go about that?
I can tell you, one of the 3 brands that I represent is very, very protective of their marketing. They want to approve every single piece that goes out in the mail, and they will verify after it goes out if it was the piece that they approved. The way to get around that is once you bring in that new client, you let that client know that here's a discount for this other business, or here's a way that you can take advantage of a promotion this other business is having. You're marketing with one brand, but once the client comes in the door, you want to filter them to the other 2 as well, to the others.
And that's worked. That's been
And
successful.
that has worked. That has worked.
Yeah, I know for us, my sales guy for a fitness machine technician stops by my store and grabs 20 pretzels every time he goes out. Brings pretzels to, my territory for fitness machine technicians is Lancaster and Berks counties. But for Philly Pretzel Factory, I'm in Avondale, which is Chester County. I'm not only creating brand awareness for myself, but I'm creating brand awareness for my other franchisees. So I don't mind, sending my pretzels out and giving them out because that's minimal cost. But it also looks good for my fitness machine technician sales guy because he could say, yes, we're new to this territory, but our business, our ownership has several businesses and they know what they're doing, and we're going to be professional. We're going to be here. We're going to be here, and we're going to market, and our technicians can be on time, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the way it works. And to Pierre's thing, one client, either residential or commercial, because I sell to both, even in the pretzel store, that's a great client list. I'm building one client list that I get to market over and over and over when I get those clients from each one of them. And that's the key to my business.
So that's probably the biggest success, is that marketing and intelligence that you through. Please, Concha, go ahead. No problem.
So there are 2 sides of the coin to franchising. One side is, as you said, maintaining quality and consistency with regard to the multi-units, and the second side is innovation or catering to the market in a specific location or territory. So how do you manage to sort of face these challenges and align with the goals of the franchisor or the brand and take both these aspects into consideration?
Thank you for that question. When it comes to creativity, it's up to the franchisor to create those brands or those services or whatever other items that they want the brand to have. It's not up to the franchisee.
Now, are you saying that as a franchisor or a franchisee right now?
As a franchisee.
Right.
As a franchisee. As a franchisor, it behooves the franchisor to take ideas from the network, from what's out there, and bring it to their, create a system for the new service and product and bring it down to the franchisee level to market. So there's two sides. You always have to be creative on the franchisor side because business is continuously changing, new services, new products, new different themes, so to speak, are always being, and if you don't recreate and reinvent yourself, you'll be behind the 8 ball and your competition will eat you alive.
Great question. Yeah, please, you guys comment. That was a
I
great
also-
question, the balance.
I agree with Pierre. I mean, the franchisee has to work with the franchisor to let them know what's going on within their territory, within their community. But at the same time, if that franchisor is not going to listen at all and just say no, 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 rather than sit down, maybe do some math, do some ideas, maybe give you the ability to try it, and they're not willing to do that, well, you're not going to have me as a franchisee, or especially a happy franchisee, for that long. And I think that's what attracted me to, especially the one brands that I'm a part of now, is I work really well with the franchisor. If I have some ideas, I'm going to give them the ideas, and even if it's a no, they are willing to prove to me why it's a no. And that's why I like these guys. I also, Philly Pretzel Factory is coming up with a franchise action committee where they're putting together 5 franchisees to sit on a board, to be that middleman in between the franchisee and the franchisor. And I think that's one way that a lot of brands that I've seen are doing it, so that the franchisees feel that they're not going to the franchisor, they're going to their action committee, and then the action committee has to present it to the franchisor, and then it comes down the pipeline like that. And I think that works really well. So any emerging brands, it's hard at the beginning, I do understand that, but that is one thing that once you get to, I would say 20, 30 locations, put that in place. Because as a franchisee, it works really well because you feel like you have somebody to go to. And as a franchisor, you're not getting beat down by every single franchisee every other day.
It's a win-win.
Exactly, it's a win-win.
Yeah. I was going to say, even FranNet, we're franchised itself as well, so each consultant has a different territory, therefore their franchisee. We have a franchise action committee for marketing. So the franchisor that you're paying the royalties to and being able to pay the marketing fund to, they're taking care of things on a national scale for the franchise. But as the franchisees get together and have the committee of the extra dollars that we're paying the marketing fund to, they're set aside to figure out from the franchisees level where those funds should be spent. So it's something collectively made up that the franchisees are now agreeing to make the use of those dollars for, as well as the franchisor having their discretion over what they want to utilize the royalties and their marketing funds for. So it helps weigh out both sides of it, where you're taking care of things more so on a local level when you're on that side of marketing versus the franchisor on the national side trying to cater to everyone. So there are ways of being able to adjust, and in the younger brands that you can be able to grow with. If it's a very established brand that you're becoming more of a number of, you're not really going to have that much power at that point to be able to help give a say to what you think should be done or how the brand should go, because they already know what they've done hundreds and hundreds of times.
Questions? Other questions, comments on this, please?
How are you making up those committees? Are they picked by the franchisor, or are the franchisees allowed to kind of elect who they think should be part of it?
So from our franchisees volunteering, there's a handful that are selected. So those who want to volunteer, because it's an active committee, so they have to be able to participate and keep up with things. People drop in and drop out, but they're also made up of the top tier offices, so that the top tier are being able to give their advice to the rest of them, and it's not just trying out new things, it's things that have been proven in their numbers, so they're able to select from, and the franchisor can rely on them to make those decisions, so it's a win-win.
For Philly Pretzel Factory, we had to put our names in if you want to be on the committee, and then the franchisees get to vote once the names are in.
Also, the franchisees vote for that.
Yes.
If that group is a group with a lot of say and a lot of power, do you at some point have concerns about whether or not kind of the power of their ideas and the energy behind that group might start to usurp kind of what the franchisor is trying to accomplish? I know for years when I was at Amco Transmissions, they had a National Association of Amco Dealers. It was not supported by nor facilitated by Amco. They hated it.
Right.
But it existed, and it had a president, and it had membership. How do you deal with the balance?
So I know Dunkin' Donuts has the same thing, Domino's has the same thing. They all have these independent organizations that are kind of the ones that fight the system. And I think that when you get into those larger brands, you're going to see that more and more because you do have more voices. So for like us again at Philly Pretzel, I think that they're doing it at the right time. We have 156-ish franchisees, and we're hoping 200 by the end of this year. So it's still a young enough brand where your top 5, 6 franchisees that want to be a part of this committee and are going to work both with the franchisor and the franchisees will listen to both sides. I think as that independent organization comes on is because a lot of franchisees feel that the franchisor is just dictating left over right and just saying it's the way it is. And they get frustrated, so they start their own organization and they'll put their own suppliers together. They'll do everything about that. And I think that's where it gets in trouble. So the action committee has to, number one, love the franchise system as a whole, be willing to work with the franchisees and the franchisors. So you have to be innovative in that sense as well. So I think that's how you kind of get rid of it, is the franchisor has to have some power over that committee, but the franchisees also have to feel like they have the say at the end of the day.
As a franchisor, you're required to have certain language in the franchise agreement that the franchisee is going to follow the franchisor's requirements. So if they're creating a committee outside to fight the system, that's fine. They can fight all they want, but they cannot have their own suppliers and their own systems in their own ways. So the franchisor has to keep tabs on everything, and it behooves also the franchisor to bring in people from the network to get their ideas, to create that committee. We have that in our two concepts, and
Kind of invited as opposed to letting
exactly.
And I'm going to go to these questions, but my comment on that, as I agree, is I think that is a symptom of a much deeper problem. That if you're not acknowledging what I think is, and it's a great question because it's sort of what the purpose of this panel and our discussion and what we've seen in our practice, because we represent franchisees and franchisors, and it doesn't always go as smoothly as possible, or there probably wouldn't be much of a role for lawyers, right? And you see that the people who are most upset, a lot of times it's a franchisor who's not listening, trying to dictate, pulling out the contract and calling the lawyer every time that there's a problem. Those are the franchise systems that are going to be so controlling, they're going to end up creating an independent organization that is independent and has lost sight of the fact that the interests between the franchisee and the franchisor are aligned. If everybody can make money, if franchisees tell me they're upset in the system, my advice usually is sell. Why do you want to be part of this? Get out of it. And but it's those franchisees that feel stuck. They end up creating these committees and then even if the franchisor fixes themselves, those systems and organizations probably will never go away. So I think by creating a group where the franchisees feel they have a voice, franchisor makes the final call, but if the franchisor isn't always still selling the franchisees on what they can force them to do, they're going to have problems.
From my experience, a lot of times in forming those committees, talking to your development team and your ops team to really identify the franchisees because they know them best. But more importantly is don't always pick your top performers and your best franchisees. Sometimes that franchisee that has a ton of potential, but all of a sudden is a little less engaged, is often the best person to put on there because you get a varying opinion, but you also get credibility to the system and to the committee because they're saying, oh, it's just not handpicked. It's not a group of your top performers that are making a ton of money. They're just going to regurgitate everything you say. Sometimes that franchisee that might be a little bit vocal, it's the best way to take his vocalness with a group of franchisees and bring it back in-house.
Because he's talking anyway.
Exactly.
It's a great comment. Richard?
Just kind of a comment. We've all heard the bell curve. Franchising is the same thing, whether you're on the franchisor side or franchisee side. When you come into any system, it's more of a comment, I guess.
Yeah.
My experience working with global franchising companies, there's a lot of value because you're learning the system. You feel like you're making a contribution, and the relationship is there. But as you become a mature franchisee owner, all of a sudden you feel less of a need of the franchisor, and the value proposition starts to disappear in regards to what you're paying the franchisor in royalties, especially if you become a multi-unit owner, which is, as we're talking, that's where a lot of the problem starts happening, whether it's marketing, other things. Are you getting the value proposition that you originally had when you got into the system? And the company I work for, as you start emerging from a startup company, literally the input you get from your franchisees, as they say, is some of the best. But do you have people that are strictly addressing those startup franchisees, and you have a team that's strictly addressing that more mature franchisee who may be a multi-unit owner. Their needs are so different. So if you have like one individual, if you're emerging, that's all he's doing is working with some of your area developers or multi-unit owners. Their requirements are very different than a single unit owner. So if you're meeting those needs, guess what? There's value to what they're paying in royalties back to the franchisor, which builds, guess what? That's what you're looking for in some franchises, is that royalty, referrals from your existing, because anybody coming into a system, they're going to say, can I call up some of your franchisees? And if they're consistently getting great feedback, they're going, I want in this system. Because it's a great business relationship.
It's a great comment, and I will turn it into a question that I'll throw to the board to say what, and maybe Kim, what you've seen with the validation process is that when you get the bigger players who are going in, do you see, and everybody can sort of comment on this, what do you see, what are some of the things franchisors are doing to make a conscious effort to attract the multi-unit franchisee versus the person sort of buying the job?
It really depends on the industry a lot of the times, because if it's something that's going to be originally started off as an owner-operator model, and as the years progress, their franchisees validate with other prospective franchisees that they don't really need the system, they're kind of doing it on their own now, which you absolutely see. It can be a red flag though too to see where that franchisor is going, because if somebody new is coming in and they've been around for 15 years and they've developed where some of their franchisees are saying that they don't feel like that they're getting any value left from their franchisor, it's a scary red flag for the new franchisee to come in, because then can they expect as them being brand new in the market that 15 years ago was a great support, but now they feel like that's declined in general from the franchisees. So it's a part of the validation, and depending on the size of the franchisor, I always recommend to clients validating with anywhere from 8 to 12 franchisees. You want to speak with the good ones, the bad ones, and the top performers, because it's going to give you a nice, well-rounded perspective to see where you can be able to take your business in your market, especially if it's a brand new market or if you're joining other franchisees in that market. What they validate in that area is going to be very important and critical to that franchisee's business too. And also what the other franchisees are doing in their validation. If they have other multiple units that they're only focusing on, say, their newest location, and they've kind of forgotten about, or they let managers take over the other locations, well, they might not feel that the support's there because they're not dealing with it on an everyday basis. So if you have area developers that are able to make sure that the ratio of franchisee support to a franchisor is good, whether it's 1 to 20 or 1 to 10, at least it's still there, and other franchisees in the system going through multiple units can be able to validate that same thing. It's very important for the franchisee's validation process.
I mean, validation in my mind is a kind of loaded gun, because a lot of franchisors I know kind of handpick who they validate, and then I go to the back of the franchise list and I pick the other ones. But say for College Hunks, which is one that we just bought, they handpicked about 6 or 7, and they all said, yeah, it's great, of course. But some of them weren't making any money yet, and some of them weren't. But then I went to some of these others and said, oh, I was one number 3, number 4. The system stinks, it's this, and the other thing. So you have to, when you're doing validation, you have to be completely open-minded. Because what that owner says, I mean, is a lot of times on the owner as the franchisee. In all honesty, I mean, if you talk to half the owners that have been in the system at Philly Pretzel Factory for more than 10 years, they'd say the same thing, run screaming. But you come talk to me after 6 months and I'm saying, you better buy it now, because in about 3 years, you're going to be stupid not to have done it. If you we took a resale out in Avondale, and the owners just, the whole time, and now I've known the corporate at Philly Pretzel Factory for about 5 years, so it's a little bit different relationship. But if you talk to the owners of that store, you would have never bought the store. It's no wonder why they had such a problem selling that store for 3 years.
And do you think that's a shift of the mindset, maybe, of the person? Some people struggle in franchising who have the mindset they've just bought a job and it's not really a business. And I know, like Mark, you and I have talked about that from a coaching standpoint and an E-myth and all of that. Do you think that's kind of an a mindset that they're getting eclipsed now, and the franchisors that are focusing on you have a business.
Yeah, I think so. And to Rich's point before about the mature franchisee is, I mean, from day one, you know you're part of a franchise system. So you know you're going to grow. I mean, you would hope that you're going to grow. If you're not growing, something's wrong with you. You got to look in the mirror a lot of times more than look at the franchisor. I think that's one of the biggest problems is too many people play the blame game rather than standing in front of the mirror and saying, what could I do that's different? How can I work with that team rather than fight the team? And that's why we're seeing, I mean, in the last 2 years, there's been 23 odd resales at Philly Pretzel Factory. And we've represented 19 of those at Murphy. It's because that ownership has grown. The system has grown. There's a couple more stipulations on being a franchise owner, but at the same time, the system's growing. Average sale per store is growing.
No earnings claims up here, remember? That was one of my rules. So on that, no, it's great. Pierre, have you have a different focus on training?
Well, yeah, as a franchisor, as a franchisee, I've been in the franchising world for about 18 years now, in a couple different concepts. But as a franchisor, you need to keep tabs on the metrics of each unit. If the franchisor is seeing there's something wrong with these numbers, they're not jiving with the average unit, something's going wrong with this unit. So that's why we have a model with the regional developers, because we will have local support. Should a unit have any kind of deviation, we'll jump right in without having to wait 6 months, a year, 2 years before the franchisee throws up their hands and says, I'm out of here, and have a disgruntled franchisee.
On that point, with knowing the numbers, I mean, it's amazing the amount of franchisees don't know their own numbers.
Right.
It's actually unbelievable to me. I know how much per job I'm making on my service brands. I know how much per pretzel it costs me, what it's going to take for me to make money that month. But it's unbelievable. When we sat at an annual convention, the amount of franchisees that went to a screen when the averages came out, because they had no idea what their numbers were.
And do you think there's some emerging franchisors that may not even have a handle on that because they have a passion for the business?
I was going to say, whether you're emerging or a mature franchise, statistically, 75% of all businesses out there, franchise or non-franchise, have a issue going on in their business. It's either HR, employee-related issue, financial, and you can start going down the list. ADP does these statistics, and it's staggering the issues that are out there. Less than 6% of all companies in the United States even use a software program for their P&L. They still use Excel spreadsheets. So it gives you a sense of, as a franchisor, we assume when we bring a franchisee in, they're a good business person. They understand the back end of the business, which becomes in many cases more critical than the front end of the business. They've got the money, they plug in there, they write the check, they're in the system. Within 6 to 12 months, all of a sudden there's, trouble in paradise, as they say.
Right, and
You're
that's
in a marriage, and you're trying to figure out how to correct the problem. The problem could have gotten corrected on the front end by actually training people on literally financial planning. And I just came out of a business which we were a bookkeeping, payroll, tax preparation business, and you'd think people get into that business, that would be their number one, and it's not. So literally, we created a software program, and literally at the end of the first year, same-store sales went up 15% out of those same stores when we got them through a literally financial planning training program, had to use software, and started really looking at how they're managing their costs and employee payroll costs and those kinds of things.
Which without those programs, you can't attract multi. We'll go back here and then up here tomorrow. Go ahead.
Yeah, relative to, thanks for the segue, managing the cost and payroll costs. And I put this out to the group, not just the panel, but from a franchisee standpoint, what's important to you right now with regard to your most important needs with managing that part of the P&L? But also, is there any concern with how it impacts the business, the new overtime rule changes as far as compensation? How does that impact you as a franchisee? Is it a concern that you are thinking about?
I mean, yeah, it concerns me if I don't know the numbers, and absolutely. I mean, I don't know what else to add to.
Now,
to the
I will
comments.
say this as a franchisor, of course, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but when it comes to the overtime rules and the changes and shifts, franchisors have moved, as many in this room are aware, that you have a balance between not wanting to be considered a co-employer. So it's very difficult for a franchisor to go too deep in terms of helping control that, or they run the risk of what's happening in the trend in McDonald's in New York and some of those other things. So I think that's tricky. And actually then to go farther to tie it back into this topic is that some of those things are happening, and some of the franchisors are being held responsible maybe, and I just kind of was thinking of it as you were asking the question, because of the less sophisticated individual franchisee, the buying a job who doesn't know what he's doing in the details of his business. So the franchisor gets in there and helps him, and then no good deed goes unpunished. The franchisee makes really bad decisions that the franchisor gets held responsible for. So the flip side of the franchisor conceding some control to a more sophisticated franchisee is perhaps avoiding some of these problems, because the franchisees then have the scale to hire their own attorneys and their own CPAs and their own professionals. So don't know if that answers the question, but that was sort of on point. Mark, you had a question over there?
Yeah, that question, bringing it back to the multi-brand ownership. Knowing what you know today, what would you do different?
Buy more.
I was going to say expand faster.
Yeah, I mean, in 6 months we've bought 4 brands. I plan on having a kind of a Rolodex of 5, we'll say. I think that the way I scaled is I have a sales guy that can work across my service brands. I have a very good manager at my store that's at the pretzel store, but he understands the operations of all my businesses, so that if something were to happen, he can jump across. I hire kids. In all honesty, I hired 2 kids from Westchester University that was a junior and a senior in college. And during their interviews, the main thing they said is, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to learn from you. So I'll hire those type of people all day long, because they look up to me not only as their boss, but as a mentor. And I've had some great mentors to show me the way from before. So if I can push those guys now onto, say, director positions in those operations, and then have managers come under them, and they can teach them the way, that's why I want to just keep going and going and going. I want to have, like I said, I want to have 5 franchise brands. I own 2 non-franchise businesses as well, but I want to have 5 solid brands under me at all times.
How about you, Kim, on that?
I mean, it really depends on the individual. I think the more that you can capture at one time, depending on the business model itself, if it's truly made to be a semi-absentee business, for example, from the very beginning, not owner-operator and then eventually semi-absentee, they're typically a little bit more simpler of a model to be able to understand and run from afar. So it can be very resourceful to be able to help expand more quickly in different brands itself. In the market space, if you're doing something that's a 12-month build out, and kind of timing it more efficiently as well, because you can have different revenue streams for each business, and then your employees, very much to what Andrew was saying, you can cross your employees in different ones in your managers. So God forbid if something happened when you needed to run out for a family emergency or fill in, you can have an interchange and have the power to help each store itself. So a lot of people coming out of corporate, for example, are used to managing large groups. They're used to that structure, so kind of putting somebody back in the place of being able to manage different branches with that amount of employees, and whether they're skilled or unskilled, depending on what that individual feels like, that's where it really comes down to what type of brand you're looking into, because it really comes down to where your strengths lie in being able to manage that group and that skill set in that particular industry.
How about you, Pierre? What would you do different?
Me personally, I would have expanded more faster. I would have bought more units at that very early stage, which what we will do with being a franchisor or franchisee for the full cycle. That's my plan.
I thought at least one of you would say go to law school.
We have too many lawyers.
My dad says that all the time. So on that, do you think there's room for the single unit, to pull the other side that? Do you think there's still the room for the person coming out who doesn't want to be the multi-unit franchisee, who wants to buy a job? A lot of people say that, they just want to buy a job. Personally, some people think that's a bad thing. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing for the right candidate, because if you own your job, you can't get laid off, and you can make more or less depending on how hard you work. But
it all depends on your personality, on individual's personality, how much they want to make, where they are in life, and many different factors. So it all depends.
So you think there's still room for that
There's
single
definitely
unit
room for that
franchisee?
individual, absolutely.
It's just like diversifying your stock portfolio. And a lot of people, that's how they kind of look at franchising as well, because you're making that investment. And you can take a single unit that really only needs marketing scale for your territory and scale it that way, or you can have multiple units for greater resale value down the road, and you can diversify your portfolio that way more. So I think it really depends on how you like to manage it, but when looking at it as an investment, it really comes down to that. Like Apple stock, you can have that and have that go up, or Netflix, how they had their stock go up, just like single franchisees, but then you can also diversify into little smaller categories.
No, I actually think it's not a great thing. Or I guess the development team has to do a really good job, because let's just say somebody wants to make $75,000 and they've met that $75,000 mark on year 3. Are they going to continue to grow to become now $100,000, or are they done? Are they complacent and they're going to just sit still? So they're going to almost bring that percentage back down again. Now, I'd rather see somebody that's so hungry that's going to go and says, I want to make $200,000, but knowing that it's going to take 2 or 3 units to do so.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I was at a franchise show, and it was a large brand, multi-unit brands, and I was telling him about my ideas for this, and we were talking, and I won't give away what the piece was. He's not here. And he said that he is the one responsible for dealing with multi-unit owners, and he's got owners who own, 9 or 10 stores. They're making $800,000 net, and he really struggles because the owners say, we only live on $400,000. We have this other $400,000 coming. We love all your ideas, but we're okay. I don't care about it. So how do you deal with that on the other side? High-end, we should all have that problem, of course. High-end complacency on multi-unit owners.
Donation to Pierre Machelini Fund.
But how do you motivate someone who says, this is what I came to do and I'm good? Or do you not care? You just say don't grow.
You really can make a franchisee sell more than the store's potential.
Right.
The store has a infinite potential for the most part. How do you motivate a franchisee to make more money?
If they're not motivated by that, it's an interesting question.
They have to do it themselves.
Right.
That's why they bought a franchise, to make money. And
right. I think one way to do it is bring in my opinion, have them almost mentor or partner up with a new franchisee and show them the way to grow their own business. I talked about all these entrepreneurs trying to latch on to me. All they say is, I want to own a business with you one day. I want to own a business with you one day. How does that work? How do I do that? So you can almost start bankrolling these guys, but you can let them be your manager at these stores. And they're going to have to grow it, because you're going to put these numbers or goals on top of that store to growth, or else you're not going to be their partner. So I think it takes a special franchisee to continuing to want to grow, but at the same time, I'm probably not one to ask, because if I get complacent,
Well, maybe that's the answer, a non-monetary, there's a certain mentorship and leadership and challenge them in different ways. So I think that's good.
I mean, it really depends on how involved they are with it, because like one of the things that a franchisee going in to explore different franchise brands is the income potential that people are looking at and that they're validating on their own. But if they're looking to hit $400,000 in income, they don't care how they have to do it, but that's personally just what their goal is, then they need X, Y, and Z amount of units for a certain brand, or maybe just one to get there. So it's part of the due diligence beforehand, I think, before you choose that company, to see how big you want to grow it, and as long as expectations are met with the franchisor on that side, because that's part of just the franchisee validation of what the potential you can have per unit.
That's a good point. As people coming in from this is more of a comment, I guess, just from a development standpoint, is really understanding as the franchisees come into the system, whether it's going to be a multi-unit owner of other brands, single unit owner, whatever the case may be, is really understanding the expectation of what they're wanting to get out of being part of that franchise system. But more importantly, I think that, at least I've learned, is what is their financial exit strategy? Most people coming into a franchise system, rarely do they talk to a franchisee on the front end about what the exit strategy is on the front end. So if you start at the end and work backwards, it changes the pathway very dramatically in regards to a single unit owner. He might be coming in and saying, in his mind, I'm thinking of just being a single unit owner. And he's looked at the franchise system and thinks, well, I can get to this 200,000, 400,000 mark. The next question might be, can you retire on that? And of course, the answer is no. You go through that money pretty quickly. Because then you're looking at what is the resale value of that business when you start to exit out of it. And all of a sudden they go, well, you know, ultimately, what is your desires, aspirations, and dreams? What is that retirement picture going to look like?
And maybe it's time, if someone is complacent, to
Right.
move on and sell the business and find a broker and let the next person take it kind of the next level. So couple more minutes here. We're getting close to 2 o'clock. Any other final questions, please?
Also on that same, I guess on that same topic is, on the development side, if you've heard more than 4 or 5 times through working with a candidate, what's my break even, what's my break even, what's my break even, walk away. Because that's all they're focused on. They're not focused on that long-term growth. And also another motivating factor is system sales and resales. If it's selling at a multiple of 5 times earnings, that's a great motivator to get somebody to think about either upping their earnings or possibly transitioning themselves out. Great thought.
Go ahead, you have a comment on it?
I was just going to say, that's a good point though, because back to the exit strategy, that's a big piece of the financing that goes in the very beginning, whether it's a single unit or multiple units, because especially with multi-unit financing, you need to be able to have secured what you need for at least the first 3 up front for it. And if you're utilizing retirement funds and doing a rollover, and ultimately you don't want to have to sell that company as a C Corp for tax purposes. So if you need to be able to convert it to an S Corp down the road, but it needs to be held as a C Corp for 5 years after you sell it, you need to hold on to that business for the full 10 years of the agreement and be able to start planning ahead of time before you can start thinking of actually selling that business, because it all comes back down to what you need to be able to repay and what you're going to be able to gain out of that original investment too.
As a franchisor, we started off with junk removal, and we're looking to move into multiple services. We're planning on launching the second one next year, but eventually we'd like to have J-Dog, painting, and whatever else it may be. Are there any potential hurdles you see with that model?
Going into different services is not a bad thing as long as they relate to the original system that was created. We at Massage Envy about 4 or 5 years ago, we were only doing massages. And now we do facials, and we sell retail products, and now we're going to be adding other facial and skincare treatments to add to the services, but they all relate to the main message of healthcare, looking beautiful, feeling beautiful.
And it's worked.
And it's worked.
It all depends on the back end. You know, we talked about the back end earlier. If the back end's set and it's, ironclad, yeah, I don't think there's any problem going into auxiliary services. But I think if you're finding franchisees or you find holes in that back end still, it's not time. And that's where your new franchisees of these new services are going to get angry, because they're going to be looking at you as saying, okay, you're already a franchise system. You should have this all down pat. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, this isn't done, this isn't done, this isn't done. They're going to get very upset real quick because they're buying you because you're already a franchise system. So my only thing would be to make sure that everything is set in stone. You know how your reporting's going to go. You know how your marketing's going to go. Everything's already built, because that's what a franchisee's going to look at you for, because you have that experience as a franchise system already.
Great. So as we get wrapped up here, I always ask one final question. So if there's one thing that you maybe didn't get to talk about in terms of this topic, or one sort of pearl of wisdom that people can use. We like this to be very practical, that they can kind of walk away with when it comes to multi-unit, multi-brand franchising. What would it be?
I say, pursue your dream. There's nothing better than doing your own thing at your own time.
Excellent.
I think if it's multi-unit, multi-brand ownership, they should have some sort of backing in franchising, some sort of resume that includes franchising, because they're going to respect franchising as a whole. They're not just somebody coming out of, corporate America saying, I want to buy this because I know I can make all this money, but they don't actually respect or know franchising, because franchising is its own kind of dog.
Great comment. Great point.
I would say for the financing end of it, to really make sure if you have a candidate that's looking at a 3-pack, 6-pack, or multiple units, instead of them saying that they have the cash to be able to just provide for the very first unit because they have the liquidity to do so, it might tie up all their liquidity and all their collateral, and they might not be able to secure the SBA financing or any other types of loans when they go to open up the second or third. So making sure that they have the right financial plan in place in the very beginning is going to be the most critical to how quickly they can grow, scale, and also if they can even get to those multiple units based off of their very first one and their timing with it. So if there's any piece I would say is just making sure that from the franchisor side and the franchisee side that there's an understanding of the financial plan in place of how they're going to be able to execute on multiple units.
Terrific comments. Well, great. I want to thank the panel. Before we go back to networking for the final hour, I said we have some time if anybody wants to hang around and meet someone you didn't get a chance to meet. I want to thank again our sponsors that really make all this possible, and obviously everybody here who kind of commits their time and comes and supports the PFA. So I just want to thank everybody for that. As I mentioned, Cherry Outside, correct your email address. By the end of the week, I will send out an email with the whole contact list so that everybody can kind of cross network. We'll probably have another meeting in the fall. I was thinking early October to do that, because I know September gets kind of tough and Labor Day. So and also want to thank Jack and Joan for the great support there, and Bill on the camera for filming this. This will be posted on the website and all of that, and I'll send you a link once that's posted after a week or so. So thank you guys. You were a terrific panel and terrific audience.